Poseidon by Franz Kafka. Poseidon sat at his desk, going over the accounts. The administration of all the waters gave him endless work. He could have had as many assistants as he wanted, and indeed he had quite a number, but since he took his job very seriously, he insisted on going through all the accounts again himself, and so his assistants were of little help to him. It cannot be said that he enjoyed the work. He carried it out simply because it was assigned to him. Indeed, he had frequently applied for what he called more cheerful work, but whenever various suggestions were put to him, it turned out that nothing suited him so well as his present employment. Needless to say, it was very difficult to find him another job. After all, he could not possibly be put in charge of one particular ocean. Quite apart from the fact that in this case, the work involved would not be less, only more petty. The great Poseidon could hold only a superior position. And when he was offered a post unrelated to the waters, the very idea made him feel sick. His divine breath came short, and his brazen chest began to heave. As a matter of fact, no one took his troubles very seriously. When a mighty man complains, one must pretend to yield, however hopeless the case may seem. No one ever really considered relieving Poseidon of his position. He had been destined to be god of the seas since time immemorial, and that was how it had to remain. What annoyed him most, and this was the chief cause of discontent with his job, was to learn of the rumors that were circulating about him. For instance, that he was constantly cruising through the waves with his trident, instead of which, here he was, sitting in the depths of the world's ocean, endlessly going over the accounts, an occasional journey to Jupiter being the only interruption of the monotony, a journey moreover from which he invariably returned in a furious temper. As a result, he had hardly seen the oceans, save fleetingly during his hasty ascent to Olympus, and had never really sailed upon them. He used to say that he was postponing this until the end of the world, for then there might come a quiet moment when, just before the end, and having gone through the last account, he could still make a quick little tour.
An Imperial Message by Franz Kafka. The Emperor, so a parable runs, has sent a message to you, the humble subject, the insignificant shadow, cowering in the remote distance before the imperial sun. The emperor from his deathbed has sent a message to you alone. He has commanded the messenger to kneel down by the bed and has whispered the message to him. So much store did he lay on it that he ordered the messenger to whisper it back into his ear again. Then, by a nod of the head, he has confirmed that it is right. Yes, before the assembled spectators of his death, all the obstructing walls have been broken down, and on the spacious and loftily mounting open staircases stand in a ring the great princes of the empire. Before all these, he has delivered his message. The messenger immediately sets out on his journey, a powerful and indefatigable man, now pushing with his right arm, now with his left. He cleaves a way for himself through the throng. If he encounters resistance, he points to his breast, where the symbol of the sun glitters. The way is made easier for him than it would be for any other man. But the multitudes are so vast, their numbers have no end. If he could reach the open fields, how fast he would fly, and soon doubtless you would hear the welcome hammering of his fists on your door. But instead, how vainly does he wear out his strength. Still, he is only making his way through the chambers of the innermost palace. Never will he get to the end of them, and if he succeeded in that, nothing would be gained. He must next fight his way down the stair. And if he succeeded in that, nothing would be gained. The courts would still have to be crossed, and after the courts, the second outer palace, and once more stairs and courts, and once more another palace, and so on for thousands of years. And if at last he should burst through the outermost gate, but never, never can that happen, the imperial capital would lie before him, the center of the world, crammed to bursting with its own sediment. Nobody could fight his way through here, even with a message from a dead man. But you sit at your window when evening falls and dream it to yourself.
Conversation with the worshipper.
There was a time I went to a church, day after day, because a girl I had fallen in love with would pray there, kneeling for half an hour every evening, when I could watch her in peace and quiet. Once, when the girl had not come, and I was glaring at the people in prayer, I noticed a young man who had thrown his scrawny figure full length on the floor. From time to time, he would grab his skull with the full force of his body and, moaning, smash it into the palms of his hands, which were resting on the stones. The only other churchgoers were a few old women, who often turned their kerchiefed heads sideways to peer at the worshipper. This attention seemed to make him happy, for prior to each of his pious outbursts, he would glance about to see whether the onlookers were numerous. Finding his conduct unseemly, I resolved to accost him when he left the church and to question him about why he was praying in this manner. Yes, indeed, I was annoyed because my girl had not come. However, he did not stand up until an hour later, crossing himself very meticulously and trudging unsteadily toward the font. I stationed myself between the font and the door, knowing I would not let him pass without an explanation. I pursed my lips, as I always do when I intend to speak firmly. I put my right leg forward and leaned on it, while casually poising my left leg on tiptoe. This, too, makes me resolute. Now it was possible that the man eyed me when sprinkling the holy water on his face. Or perhaps he had already noticed me earlier with some anxiety, for now he unexpectedly dashed outside. The glass door slammed shut. And when I promptly went outside, I could no longer see him, for there were several narrow streets and the area was thronged. He did not show up again during the next few days, but my girl did come. She was wearing her black dress with the diaphanous lace on the shoulders, the crescent of the chemise neckline showing underneath, and with a nicely cut silk bertha hanging down from the edge of the lace. And, since the girl had come, I forgot all about the young man. Nor did I concern myself with him even later, when he started coming regularly again and praying in his usual style. However, he always hurried past me, averting his face. Perhaps it was because I could only picture him in motion, so that even when standing still he appeared to be skulking along. One evening, I dawdled in my room, but then I went to church after all. I did not find the girl, and I was about to go home when I spotted that young man lying there again. The old incident crossed my mind, piquing my curiosity. I tiptoed over to the doorway, handed a coin to the blind beggar sitting there, and squeezed in next to him behind the open wing of the door. I sat there for an hour, perhaps with a cunning expression. I felt fine and resolved to come here often. During the second hour, I found it absurd to be waiting there for the worshipper. Nevertheless, growing angry, I sat for a third hour, letting the spiders crawl over my clothes, while the last few people, breathing loudly, quit the darkness of the church. Then he came too. He walked gingerly, his feet cautiously testing the ground before treading. I stood up, took a large, straight step, and grabbed the young man. "Good evening," I said, clutching his collar and pushing him down the steps to the illuminated square. When we reached the bottom, he said to me in a completely unhinged voice, "Good evening, my dear sir. Do not be angry with me, your humbly devoted servant." "Well," I said, "I want to ask you some questions, sir. Last time you escaped. Today you will scarcely succeed. You are a compassionate man, sir, and you will allow me to go home. I am to be pitied, that is the truth." "No," I shouted into the din of a passing trolley. "I won't allow you. This is the sort of encounter I like. You are a lucky catch. I consider myself fortunate." Then he said, "Oh God, your heart is alive, but your head is a block of wood. You say I'm a lucky catch. How lucky you must be. For my poor luck is one that teeters. It teeters on a thin edge, and if anyone touches my poor luck, it will fall on the questioner. Good night, sir." "Fine," I said, clutching his right hand. "If you won't answer me, then I'll start yelling here in the street. And all the shop girls who are now coming out of their shops and all their sweethearts who are looking forward to seeing them will come dashing over here, for they'll think that a cab horse has collapsed or that something similar has happened. Then I'll make a public display of you." He now tearfully kissed my hands, alternating between them. "I'll tell you what you wish to know, but please let us go over to that side street." I nodded, and that was where we went. However, the darkness of the street, with its widely separated yellow streetlights, was not dark enough for him. Instead, he led me into the low hallway of an old house, under a tiny, dripping lamp that hung in front of the wooden stairs. There, he self-importantly pulled out his handkerchief, and spreading it on a step, he said, "Do sit down, my dear sir. This way you can ask your questions more easily. I'll remain standing, so I can answer more easily. But please don't torment me." So I sat down, and squinting up at him, I said, "You are an utter lunatic, that's what you are. How can you behave like that in church? It is so annoying and so unpleasant for the onlookers. How can people feel devout if they have to look at you?" He was pressing his body against the wall. Only his head was moving freely in the air. "Don't be annoyed. Why should you be annoyed at things that aren't relevant to you? I'm annoyed at myself when I behave imprudently, but if someone else behaves imprudently, then I'm delighted. So please don't be annoyed if I tell you that the goal of my life is to be looked at by other people." "What are you saying?" I cried, much too loudly for the low hallway, but then I was afraid my voice would weaken. "Really, now, what have you said?" "Why, I can sense, indeed, since I first laid eyes on you, I have sensed what sort of condition you are in. I'm a man of experience, and I'm not joking when I say that your condition is a seasickness on dry land. It is such that you have forgotten the real names of things, and in your great haste you now pour random names upon them. Hurry, hurry, but the moment you run off, you forget your names for them. You called the poplar in the fields the Tower of Babel. For you did not know or did not want to know that it was a poplar, and now it is swaying again without a name, and you would have to call it when Noah was drunk. I was a bit stunned when he said, I'm glad I didn't understand what you said. Annoyed, I quickly said, the fact that you are glad shows that you did understand. Of course it does, my good sir. But you too spoke in a bizarre way. I placed my hands on a higher step, leaned back, and in this almost unassailable position, which is a wrestler's last resort, I said, you have a strange way of wriggling out of a predicament by assuming that other people suffer from your condition. These words lent him courage. He folded his hands together in order to make his body compact, then said a bit reluctantly, No, I don't act this way with everyone, for instance you, because I can't. But I would be glad if I could, for then I wouldn't need the attention of the people in church. Do you know why I need it? This question left me perplexed. I certainly did not know, nor do I believe I wanted to know. After all, I was not the one who wanted to come here, I told myself at this point. This man forced me to listen to him. So all I had to do was shake my head to indicate that I did not know, but I simply could not get my head to move. The man, standing across from me, smiled. Then he dropped to his knees and talked with a faraway look. There has never been a time when I could truly convince myself that I was alive. You see, I only have such flimsy notions of the things around me that I always believe they used to be alive but are now fading away. I always, my dear sir, long to see things as they may be before they show themselves to me. In their earlier state, they are probably still beautiful and calm. They must be. For that's how I often hear people describing them. Since I held my tongue, and only involuntary twitches in my face showed how uneasy I was, he asked, You do not believe that people talk like that? I felt I ought to nod, but was unable to do so. Really? You don't believe it? Oh, but listen, one afternoon when I was a child, I opened my eyes after taking a brief nap, and even though I was still half asleep, I heard my mother on the balcony asking someone below, in a normal tone of voice, What are you doing, my dear? It's so hot. A woman answered from the garden, I'm having coffee outdoors. They were speaking offhandedly, and not all too plainly, as if it were a matter of course. I thought I was being asked a question. So I reached into my back trouser pocket as if looking for something. But I wasn't looking for anything. I simply wanted to change my position in order to show my interest in the conversation. While so doing, I said that that was such a strange incident and that I simply did not understand it. I added that I didn't believe it was true and that it must have been made up for some specific purpose that I could not fathom. Then I shut my eyes, for they were aching. Oh, but it's good that you agree with me, and it was unselfish of you to stop me and tell me so. Just why should I feel ashamed, or why should we feel ashamed that I don't walk upright and trudge along, that I don't strike my cane on the pavement or graze the clothes of the people who pass by so noisily? Wouldn't I actually be justified in complaining defiantly that I have to slink along the houses as a shadow with square shoulders, sometimes vanishing in the panes of the shop windows? What awful days I'm going through. Why are all our buildings so poorly built that high structures sometimes collapse and no one can find a cogent reason? At such times, I clamber over the rubble heaps, asking anyone I run into, how could this happen? In our city, a new building, that's the 5th one today, just imagine. and no one can give me an answer. Often people collapse on the street and remain lying there, dead. Then all the shopkeepers open their doors, which are hung with wares. They step out nimbly, whisk the corpse into a house, then re-emerge with smiling lips and eyes and speak, "Good day, the sky is pale. I sell lots of kerchiefs. Yes, the war." I slink into the house, and after several anxious attempts at raising my hand while crooking my finger, I finally tap on the janitor's small window. "My good fellow," I say amiably, "a dead man has been brought here. Please take me to him." And when he shakes his head as if undecided, I say firmly, "My good fellow, I am from the secret police. Show me the corpse immediately." "A corpse?" he now asks, and is almost offended. "No, we have no corpse here. This is a respectable place." So I say goodbye and leave. But then, when I have to cross a large square, I forget everything. I am confused by the difficulty of this undertaking, and I often think to myself, if people build such huge squares out of sheer exuberance, why don't they also add a stone balustrade leading across the square? Today the wind is blowing from the southwest. The air on the square is stirred up. The spire of the town hall is reeling in small circles. Why don't they end the commotion? All the window panes are banging loudly, and the lampposts are bending like bamboo. The robe of the Virgin Mary on the column is twisting, and the storm wind is tearing away at it. Doesn't anyone see it? The ladies and gentlemen who are supposed to walk on the stones are gliding. When the wind stops to catch its breath, they halt, exchange a few words, and bow as they take their leave. But if the wind starts blasting again, they are unable to resist it, and they all raise their feet in unison. They do have to clutch their hats tightly, but their eyes twinkle cheerfully, as if merely a mild breeze were wafting. I am the only one who is afraid. Abused as I felt, I said, "The story you told me earlier about your mother and the woman in the garden does not sound the least bit strange. Not only have I heard and experienced many such stories, I have even taken part in a few. Why, it's a perfectly normal business. Do you believe I could not have said the same thing if I had been on the balcony or responded in the same way from the garden? Such an ordinary incident." When I said that, he seemed very happy. He said that I was dressed nicely, and that he liked my necktie very much, and what a fine complexion I had, and that confessions were the most informative when they were rescinded. Conversation with the drunk. As I sauntered out the front door, I was ambushed by the sky with its moon and stars and sweeping vault, and by the ring square with its town hall, its church, and its Virgin Mary on her column. I calmly stepped from the shade into the moonlight, unbuttoned my overcoat, and warmed up. Then, raising my hands, I silenced the soughing of the night and began to ponder. What is it you all are doing pretending to be real? Are you trying to make me believe that I am unreal, standing strangely on the green pavement? Yet it's been so long since you were real, you, sky, and you, ring square, have never been real. It is true, you are all still superior to me, but only when I leave you in peace. Thank goodness, Moon, you are no longer Moon. But perhaps it's negligent of me to keep calling you, who are named Moon, Moon. Why are you no longer so frolicsome when I call you Forgotten Paper Lantern in a Strange Color? And why do you almost draw back when I call you Virgin Mary on the column? And I no longer discern your menacing stance, Virgin Mary on the column, when I call you Moon that sheds yellow light. It really seems to do you no good when someone thinks about you. Your courage and your health start waning. God, how wholesome it must be when a thinker learns from a drunk. Why is everything hushed? I believe the wind is gone. And these cottages, which often roll across the square as if on tiny wheels, are completely pounded down. Hush, hush. One can't see the thin black line that usually divides them from the ground. And I broke into a run. I ran around the large square 3 times unhindered, and since I encountered no drunk, I ran toward Emperor Charles Street without reducing my speed or feeling any strain. My shadow often ran, smaller than I, along the wall as if in a ditch between wall and street. When I passed the firehouse, I heard noise from the small ring, and when I reached it, I saw a drunk standing by the ironwork of the fountain, stretching his arms out level and stamping his feet in clogs on the ground. First I halted until I was breathing more calmly, then I walked over to him, doffed my top hat, and introduced myself. Good evening, gentle nobleman. I am 23 years old, but I have no name as yet. You, however, most likely come with an astonishing, indeed a singable name from that great city of Paris. You are redolent with the quite unnatural smell of the dissolute French court. With your colored eyes, you must have viewed those great ladies who stand on the high, bright terrace, turning ironically at their narrow waists, while the bedizened trains of their gowns, spreading out on the stairs, trail off on the sand in the garden. Isn't it true that long poles are set up everywhere, and that footmen in impudently cut gray tailcoats and in white knee breeches climb those poles, wrapping their legs around them, but with their torsos often leaning back and to the side, for they have to pull up ropes to hoist huge gray linen sheets from the ground and span them in the air, because the great lady desires a hazy morning. When he belched, I said, almost startled, "Is it really true, sir, that you come from our Paris, from that stormy Paris, from that effusive hailstorm?" When he belched again, I said, flustered, "I know I am being shown a great honor." And with nimble fingers I buttoned my overcoat. Then I spoke in a fervent but timid voice. "I know you don't regard me as worthy of an answer, but my life would be filled with weeping if I didn't question you today. Let me ask you, sir, who are so nicely spruced up, is it true what they say? Are there people in Paris who consist entirely of ornate clothing? And are there houses in Paris that have nothing but portals? And is it true that on summer days the sky is a fleeting blue, embellished only by small white heart-shaped clouds that are pasted on? And is there a waxworks, mobbed by visitors, that contains nothing but trees hung with small plaques bearing the names of the most famous heroes, criminals, and lovers? And now this news, this blatant pack of lies. Don't those Paris streets suddenly branch out? They're unruly, aren't they? Things aren't always all right, and how could they be? Sometimes there's an accident. People gather, coming from the side streets with their urban stride, their feet barely touching the pavement. They are all curious, but also afraid of being disappointed. They pant, craning their little heads. But should they touch one another, they bow deeply and apologize. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. It's awfully crowded. Do forgive me. It was very clumsy of me, I admit. My name is Jérôme Faroche. I'm a grocer on Rue du Cabotin. Please allow me to invite you for lunch tomorrow. My wife would be so delighted too." That's how they talk, while the street is dazed and the smoke from the chimneys wafts down between the houses. That's how it is. And if possible, 2 carriages halt on a bustling boulevard in an elegant neighborhood. Footmen gravely open the doors. 8 noble Siberian borzois prance down and dash across the roadway, barking and leaping, and people say that those are young Parisian coxcombs in disguise. His eyes had shut tight. When I fell silent, he thrust both hands into his mouth and yanked at his lower jaw. His clothes were filthy. He had probably been thrown out of a wine shop, and it hadn't quite dawned on him yet. It may have been that brief, utterly calm pause between day and night when, without your expecting it, your head dangles from your neck, and without your noticing it, everything halts because you are not watching it, and it then vanishes. While you remain alone with a bent body, peering around but seeing nothing, feeling no resistance from the air, yet mentally clinging to the memory of houses standing at a certain distance from us with roofs and, fortunately, angular chimneys through which the darkness flows into the houses, through the garrets into the diverse rooms. And it is fortunate that tomorrow will be a day when, incredible as it is, we will be able to see everything. Now, the drunk's eyebrows rose so sharply that a shiny glow formed between his eyebrows and his eyes, and he explained in fits and snatches, "You see, it's like this. I'm sleepy, you see, that's why I'll be going to sleep. You see, I have a brother-in-law on St. Wenceslaus Square. That's where I'm going, because that's where I live, because that's where I have my bed. I'm going now, only you see, I don't know his name or where he lives. I guess I've forgotten. But it doesn't matter, because I don't even know if I actually have a brother-in-law. You see, now I'm going. Do you believe I'll find him?" To which I replied without qualms, "I'm certain you will. But you're coming from abroad, and your servants don't happen to be with you. Allow me to guide you." He didn't respond. I therefore offered him my arm, so he could link up with me. Great noise. I sit in my room, in the headquarters of the noise of the entire apartment. I hear all the doors slamming. Because of the noise, I am spared only the footsteps of the people running between them. I can also hear the banging of the oven door in the kitchen. My father breaks down the doors of my room and trudges through them in his trailing robe. The ashes are being scraped out of the stove in the next room. Vali, shouting word after word through the vestibule, asks whether father's hat has been cleaned. A hissing that aims to be friendly with me raises the shriek of a responding voice. The apartment door is unlatched, rasping like a catarrhal throat, then opens further with the singing of a female voice, and finally closes with a dull male thud, which is the most inconsiderate sound of all. Father is gone. Now the more delicate, more diffuse, more hopeless noise begins, led by the voices of the two canaries. It already crossed my mind earlier, and now, with the canaries, I again wonder if I shouldn't open the door a tiny crack, slither into the next room like a snake, and remaining like that on the floor, ask my sisters and their governess for some peace and quiet.